I used to think there would be a moment, a grand, cinematic climax, where all my sacrifices would finally be recognized. That building Ironcrest developments from nothing would somehow make me invincible. That the calloused hands, the 20-hour days, the missed birthdays and sleepless nights would mean something more permanent than just success. I thought love would be part of that permanence too, that Alina and I had built a life stronger than any skyscraper we ever commissioned. After all, she found me when I had nothing but a blueprint and a dangerous amount of stubbornness. She said she believed in me, and I believed her. We were partners, not just in the contracts we signed or the deals we chased down, but in the life we stitched together from ambition and long nights. Ironcrest wasn't just a company, it was a legacy we whispered about at 3 a.m. when the rest of the world was asleep. It was supposed to be ours. Until today. Until the moment she looked me dead in the eye, her mouth curving into something that wasn't quite a smile, wasn't quite a frown. Just a calculation. Like she was running numbers in her head, assessing risk, hedging her bets. Her voice was cool, deliberate, almost clinical when she said it. You built it, but my boyfriend will be CEO now. The words didn't register at first. They floated in the air between us, absurd, like she had misspoken, and we'd laugh about it a minute later over coffee. But her eyes didn't flinch. She wasn't joking. She wasn't crying. She wasn't even apologizing. She was delivering a decision like it was a quarterly report. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. Some part of me, the part that had been slowly, quietly bleeding to death from 1,000 small cuts I hadn't wanted to name, had already known. And now that the final blow had landed, I felt nothing but a strange, weightless clarity. Alina stood there, beautiful and polished as ever, wearing the tailored suit we picked out together for important meetings. Her diamond earrings, the ones I gave her after we closed our first big deal, caught the afternoon light and threw it back at me like tiny shards. Beside her, half a step back, was Ronan Wells. The boyfriend. My employee. My mistake. He didn't speak, but the smug tilt of his head said everything. I didn't argue. I didn't ask for explanations. I didn't demand answers that, deep down, I realized I already had. Instead, I slowly slid my phone from the inside pocket of my jacket. I didn't rush. I didn't need to. They watched me, a flicker of uncertainty crossing Alina's face for the first time. Ronan's bravado faltered too, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. I unlocked the screen with a flick of my thumb. Scrolled to a contact simply labeled M. Vale. Pressed call. 1 ring. 2. Then a voice, cool and professional. Mr. Rhodes. Proceed, I said simply, then ended the call without waiting for a response. When I looked up, it wasn't anger I saw on their faces. It wasn't triumph either. It was fear. Real fear. Alina's mouth opened, a slight gasp escaping before she shut it, swallowing hard. Ronan took a small step forward like he wanted to speak, to demand an explanation. But for once, he had no script ready. The blood drained from their faces almost simultaneously, as if they both realized something at the exact same moment. They had miscalculated. They had bet everything on the wrong assumption, that I would be blindsided, paralyzed, desperate, that I would flail and rage and grasp for something that had already been stolen out from under me. They thought they were delivering the killing blow. They had no idea I had already rewritten the rules of the game. I tucked my phone away, straightened my jacket, and looked them each in the eye. First Alina, then Ronan. I didn't smile. I didn't sneer. I just let the silence stretch, thick and suffocating. You shouldn't have underestimated the man who built the foundation you're standing on, I said, my voice calm, almost pitying. Because if you understood anything about construction, you'd know, the foundation always outlasts the decor. Neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. It was as if the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for something, anything, to happen. I didn't give them the satisfaction. I simply turned, walked past them without another glance, and pushed open the door that would lead me back to the world where real power lived. The kind built not on whispered betrayals and cocktail party alliances, but on concrete, contracts, and conviction. Behind me, the echo of their unraveling began. Low, panicked voices, hurried whispers, the first cracks in the glossy facade they had tried so hard to maintain. I didn't look back. I had already decided. This was the moment they lost everything. And the best part? They didn't even realize how much they had already given away. Not yet, but they would. Very soon. And when that moment came, they wouldn't find rage waiting for them. They would find consequences, silent, surgical, and irreversible, just like I had planned. It's funny how memory works. In the moment, you don't realize you're living through the prologue of your own downfall. You tell yourself it's just a small compromise, just a shortcut, just a favor. Looking back, it was all there. The warnings, the hairline fractures in the walls we thought were unbreakable. Ironcrest Developments wasn't born in some sleek office tower. It was built in a two-car garage that smelled like sawdust and burnt coffee. I remember the cracked concrete floor, the second-hand drafting table, the heater that barely worked in winter. It was me, a handful of legal pads, a refurbished laptop, and a belief so big it didn't fit inside the walls. Alina was there too, back then. She walked into my life wearing ambition like a second skin, and I mistook it for love. We were young, hungry, stupid enough to think hard work alone could protect us. She wasn't just a supporter, she was a strategist. Alina had the gift of presentation, the kind that could make crumbling drywall sound like a design feature. She helped me craft the image that clients bought into. I was the builder, the architect of blueprints and budgets. She was the storyteller. It worked, until it didn't. Our first $10 million project was a lakeside development deal, 20 luxury homes, tight deadlines, tighter budgets. We pulled it off, barely. I worked 80-hour weeks until my hands blistered and my back ached so badly I slept sitting up. Alina schmoozed the investors, spun near disasters into charming anecdotes at fundraisers. When we finally got that wire transfer for the last payment, we sat on the garage floor, laughing like idiots, champagne dripping from the ceiling because I popped the cork wrong. That was the real Ironcrest. Two people, a dream, and an exhaustion so deep it felt holy. But somewhere between that moment and now, a third figure slipped into the picture. His name was Ronan Wells. I still remember the day Alina introduced him. She framed it like a casual opportunity. "We need someone who gets branding," she said, handing me his resume over breakfast. "Someone who can polish our image." "He's brilliant, Eli." Ronan was slick. The kind of guy who could sell ice to a snowman and make him feel lucky for the chance. His references were immaculate. His portfolio gleamed. I didn't see the danger because he wore it so well. Tailored suits, charming smirks, just the right amount of self-deprecation. He made you feel like you were in on the joke with him, even if you didn't know the punchline yet. I hired him. I let him in. That's on me. At first, he delivered. Big time. The new website. The rebrand. The media interviews Alina set up. Ironcrest grew faster than I could have imagined. We started landing projects that made my father, a man who once said dreams were for suckers, finally say he was proud of me. But the faster we climbed, the more I noticed cracks. Little things, barely big enough to trip over, but there if you looked. Ronan's meetings with Alina that ran late. The way he always seemed to know internal gossip before even my CFO did. His glib jokes at my expense at company retreats, brushed off with a laugh when I stiffened. Still, I didn't question it. Couldn't afford to. We were winning. And winning makes you stupid sometimes. The only person who wasn't charmed was Jules Moreno, my CFO. She came to me once, quiet and grim, her hands folded tight in her lap. "He's not who he says he is, Eli," she warned. "He's positioning himself. Watch your six." I thanked her. I promised to keep an eye out. Then I buried the conversation under a mountain of deadlines and distractions. I told myself Jules was being paranoid, that success naturally bred jealousy. God, I was a fool. The betrayal wasn't loud. It didn't come with sirens or alarms. It came in whispers at galas, in the way Alina started finishing my sentences in meetings, badly, in how Ronan was always just around when she needed a second opinion. Small things, dismissible things, until they weren't. It wasn't until the day Callie, my assistant, the only other person who truly knew where every body was buried at Ironcrest, dropped a folder on my desk that the haze lifted. "Thought you should see this, sir," she said, voice careful. Inside were copies of internal documents, financial filings, proxy voting plans, authorization letters, things that needed my signature and didn't have it, things that bore Alina's and Ronan's names instead. I flipped through them, slower and slower with every page. They were trying to shift voting power behind my back, position themselves to control board decisions, to control Ironcrest itself. My Ironcrest. I closed the folder and leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling like maybe the answer was hidden in the tiles. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a coup. And it wasn't just business. It was personal. Ronan was never just a marketing guy. He was a parasite, waiting until the host was fat enough to feed on. And Alina, she wasn't an innocent. She hadn't been for a long time. Maybe she never was. Maybe I just saw what I wanted to see. That day, something in me shifted. Hardened. I didn't confront them. Not then. Because real builders don't scream when the scaffolding shakes. They reinforce the foundation. And they wait. Hindsight is a cruel teacher. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It replays every ignored warning, every missed sign, over and over in your mind until you can't tell whether you're remembering it or being haunted by it. And looking back now, I realized the signs were everywhere. The problem was, I didn't want to see them. Late meetings. That's how it started. Alina used to come home by 8, dinner still warm, stories about potential investors or client pitches spilling out of her like she couldn't wait to share them. Then, slowly, it became 9. Then 10. Then not at all. Working late with Ronan, she would text, always casual, always breezy. I told myself it was dedication, that we were a team and she was pulling her weight. But deep down, something sour would twist in my gut every time Ronan's name popped up. Whispers at galas. I'd catch little half-smirks from people who used to greet me with firm handshakes. Pitying glances traded when they thought I wasn't looking. I blamed it on envy, on success breeding resentment. I convinced myself we were simply outgrowing the circles we once begged to be part of. But the worst were the moments Ronan just happened to be around her. Always nearby, always available. A jacket slipped onto her shoulders when she shivered. A hand guiding her elbow through a crowded room. Little things. Things that could be explained a dozen ways if you were desperate enough to lie to yourself. And God, was I desperate? I thought about the time we sat in the boardroom going over the Ridgeway expansion project. I had spent hours finalizing the pitch, running numbers, coordinating contractors. When it came time to present, Alina stepped in, speaking over me, smiling graciously, clarifying my points as if I were some intern fumbling through his first week. I laughed it off later, told myself she was excited, proud, that maybe I was being sensitive. Then there was Ronan, sitting back, arms folded, a smirk pulling at the corners of his mouth, like he knew something I didn't. I told myself it didn't matter. That results were all that counted. That Ironcrest was thriving, and minor bruises to my pride were a small price to pay. It wasn't pride they were bruising. It was ownership. There was another moment, too, one that lingered longer than it should have. At a company retreat upstate, after one too many drinks, Ronan clinked his glass against mine and laughed. "Hope you're keeping the throne warm for me, boss." Everyone chuckled, even Alina. I forced a smile, told him he'd have to pry it from my cold, dead hands. It was a joke. It was all a joke. Except it wasn't. I should have listened closer. I should have seen it for what it was, not banter, but a warning shot. A declaration of intent. The day Callie handed me that folder was the day the world shifted on its axis. It was a Thursday, late afternoon. The office was humming with that pre-weekend buzz, deals being finalized, meetings wrapping up early. I was reviewing proposals for a new downtown build when she knocked once and slipped inside. "Sir," she said, voice unusually low. "You need to see this." Callie was young, but sharp, the kind of assistant you could trust with your calendar, your contacts, and occasionally, your soul. She didn't rattle easily. I opened the folder and scanned the first few pages. My brain didn't register it immediately. It was too careful, too clean. Financial documents, property acquisitions, voting rights shifts, internal memos, all signed and countersigned. By Alina and Ronan, but not by me. Somehow, over the last 6 months, they had been maneuvering in the background, using proxy shares, side deals, and quietly amended contracts to position themselves as a power block within Ironcrest's board, trying to gut my authority without ever confronting me directly, trying to take the company out from under me. I sat back, folder open on the desk, feeling the slow, cold wash of understanding creep over me. Every late meeting, every half-heard whisper, every slight at every gala, it had all been leading to this. They weren't just planning to push me aside. They were planning to erase me. Ironcrest, the thing I bled to build, wasn't just a prize to them, it was a crown. And they were already fitting it to Ronan's head. I closed the folder carefully, laying my hand flat on top of it. My mind wasn't racing. It was moving with terrifying clarity, like a clockwork mechanism clicking into place. I didn't storm into Alina's office. I didn't call Ronan into a confrontation. Because now I understood something essential. They thought I was the builder. They forgot I was also the architect. And architects don't panic when the walls crack. They redesign the foundation underneath your feet. I nodded once at Callie. Thank you, I said, my voice steady. She hesitated by the door. Sir, what do you want me to do? I looked at her, and for the first time in months, I smiled. Nothing, I said. They already set their trap. Now it was time to build mine. And this time, I wasn't building for their success. I was building for their collapse. The invitation came wrapped in polished deception, a private, executive dinner at the Ironcrest downtown office. Alina's assistant sent the formal email, dressed up with words like strategic realignment and new leadership initiatives. On the surface, it was the kind of event that might have launched the next great phase of our company. The kind of thing I would have once walked into with excitement buzzing under my skin. Not tonight. Tonight, I walked in knowing it was a funeral. Their funeral. And I was already dressed for the occasion. The conference room had been transformed, subtle but deliberate. White linen tablecloths. Finger foods plated like artwork. A few bottles of champagne chilling in silver buckets. Everything about it screamed premature celebration. Alina stood near the head of the table, smiling like a hostess at a gala she barely tolerated. Ronan hovered close by, his hand brushing the small of her back in a way so practiced, so public, it might have once broken something inside me to see it. Now it only confirmed what I already knew. They weren't hiding anymore because, in their minds, they had already won. A few executives from our board were already seated, murmuring politely, glancing at each other with barely disguised curiosity. No one knew exactly why they were here. But if they had been paying attention, really paying attention, they would have recognized the gleam of blood in the water. I took a seat at the opposite end of the table. I didn't touch the champagne. I didn't smile. I simply folded my hands on the polished surface and waited. Ronan was the first to speak. He stood slowly, adjusting the cufflinks on his sleeves like he had rehearsed this moment in a mirror a dozen times. His voice rang out with that effortless charisma he wielded like a weapon. Thank you all for joining us tonight, he began. As you know, Ironcrest has achieved tremendous success over the past few years, thanks to bold leadership and visionary partnerships. His eyes flicked toward Alina, then toward me, a brief, smug acknowledgement. I remained perfectly still. We're here tonight to announce some exciting changes, he continued, the words practically dripping with self-satisfaction. Changes that will position Ironcrest for even greater achievements. Then Alina stepped forward, her voice soft, polished, every word sharp as glass. You built Ironcrest, she said, looking directly at me, the same tone, the same rehearsed delivery as the day she betrayed me in my own office. But it's time for the next evolution. Ronan will be assuming the role of CEO, effective immediately. There it was. The room froze. You could feel it, the collective inhale, the shock breaking against the walls like a rogue wave. A few board members blinked in confusion. One or two started to open their mouths, questions forming on their lips. I didn't blink. I didn't frown. I simply rose from my chair, smoothing my jacket with deliberate care. Excuse me, I said, my voice calm, almost courteous. I turned and walked out of the room before anyone could process what was happening. Alina's mouth twitched as if she was about to call after me, to demand I stay and watch my own dethroning. But I wasn't leaving to lick my wounds. I was leaving to finish what I started. My footsteps echoed in the hallway as I pulled out my phone. Scrolled once. Found the number. Marcus Vale, founder and principal of Vale Strategic Holdings. A man with more power stitched into his three-piece suits than Ronan could dream of accumulating in a lifetime. And most importantly, the man who, thanks to a quiet merger I orchestrated months ago, now owned 51% of Ironcrest's controlling interest. A merger Alina and Ronan had been too busy scheming to notice. I pressed call. It rang once before Marcus answered, his voice crisp, efficient. Mr. Rhodes. Time to proceed, I said simply. No pleasantries. No hesitation. Understood, he replied. Then the line went dead. I tucked the phone away, exhaled slowly, and let the tension drain from my shoulders. It was almost over now. Months of watching, planning, waiting, letting them dig their own graves one signature, one secret meeting at a time. And now they thought they had me cornered. They had no idea they were the ones walking straight into a trap. When I returned to the conference room, it was like stepping onto the stage of a play already in collapse. Alina's smile was slipping. Ronan looked vaguely uncomfortable, shifting from foot to foot. The executives glanced between each other, sensing that something had gone terribly wrong but not yet understanding what. I retook my seat. I folded my hands again. I said nothing. I didn't need to, because the real announcement wasn't theirs to make. And very, very soon, everyone in this room would know it. The next morning, the boardroom was colder than usual, despite the sunlight spilling through the floor-to-ceiling windows. It was a crisp, cutting kind of cold, the kind that seeped into the bones of a place before anyone even opened their mouths. The executives filed in one by one, their expressions taut with unease. They could smell it now, the shift in the air, the static tension. They didn't know which way it would break yet, but they could feel the storm brewing. Ronan swaggered in like a king returning from battle, chest puffed, grinning like he had already signed the final decree. Alina followed, pearls glinting at her throat, her heels clicking against the polished floor with sharp authority. She gave me a single glance, cool, dismissive, before taking her seat beside him. I sat at the head of the table, the same seat I'd occupied since Ironcrest had been little more than a risky bet against the odds. I didn't rise to greet them. I didn't offer a handshake. I just watched. The final person to enter the room wasn't an Ironcrest executive. It was Marcus Vale. He walked in flanked by two of his senior partners, his presence slicing through the room like a scalpel. His suit was so precisely tailored it looked like armor. His expression was unreadable, almost bored, as if this entire meeting was a foregone conclusion. Behind him, moving with a quiet, lethal precision, was Darcy Quinn, my attorney. She wore a slim, dark suit and carried a single black leather folder tucked under one arm. The moment Darcy stepped in, Ronan's smile faltered. The moment Marcus pulled out a chair at the opposite end of the table, Alina's hand tightened around her champagne glass from last night, a barely perceptible crack forming in her perfectly polished facade. I gave it exactly 3 beats, 3 slow, deliberate breaths, before I leaned forward and spoke. As per Ironcrest's updated charter, any proposed changes to senior leadership must receive unanimous board approval, I said calmly, my voice slicing through the thick silence. Effective immediately. A few of the board members shifted, blinking at each other. A murmur started down the table. Ronan laughed short, sharp, and ugly. You're joking, he said, voice pitching higher than he intended. Marcus Vale set a thick binder onto the table with a heavy, deliberate thud. No joke, Marcus said. Mr. Rhodes' motion has full validity under the new terms of the merger with Vale Strategic Holdings. Alina leaned forward, her smile strained, the whites of her knuckles standing out against her skin. That merger wasn't authorized, she snapped. It wasn't. It was, Darcy Quinn interrupted smoothly, sliding a copy of the merger documents across the table. And it was fully disclosed in the quarterly filings you signed off on. Ronan grabbed the papers, skimming them furiously, his face draining of color with every line. He didn't understand what he was reading, not really. He didn't have to. The fear blooming in his eyes said he understood the only part that mattered. They had no control. Not anymore. And given the terms, Marcus continued, his voice almost lazy with amusement, Mr. Rhodes retains not only a controlling interest but also a golden veto. No leadership changes can occur without his explicit consent. I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms loosely across my chest. Ronan opened his mouth again to argue, to shout, to plead, maybe, but he never got the chance. Because Darcy was already sliding another folder across the table, this one thicker, heavier. Additionally, she said, voice like silk over steel, we have secured documentation of collusion between Ms. Rhodes and Mr. Wells, including unauthorized attempts to reallocate company shares, fraudulent misrepresentation of assets, and conspiracy to enact a hostile takeover. The blood drained from Alina's face so quickly I thought she might actually faint. The executives down the table sat frozen, watching the implosion happen in real time. No one moved to stop it. No one even tried. Because the one thing you learn quickly in business is that loyalty is conditional, especially when it's loyalty to sinking ships. Alina surged to her feet, her chair screeching against the hardwood. This isn't over, she hissed, her voice trembling with fury. I lifted an eyebrow. It is, I said simply. Darcy pushed yet another document forward, a cease and desist order against Ronan, preventing him from contacting any Ironcrest clients or soliciting any of our contractors. His severance package, once robust, was now stripped to a bare settlement contingent on strict NDA terms. Violate them, and he'd lose even that. He looked at Alina as if she might somehow save him. She couldn't even save herself. I rose slowly, buttoning my jacket with a small, deliberate motion. Effective immediately, I said, addressing the board and no one else. Ronan Wells is terminated from Ironcrest Developments. Alina Rhodes will be removed from all financial and strategic oversight pending internal review. A heavy, thick silence followed. And then, slowly, one by one, the board members began nodding. Not out of loyalty, out of survival. Because no one wants to be tied to a ship on fire. Alina stood there, frozen, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Ronan looked gutted, hollowed out like a man who had just realized he built his house on sand and watched the tide roll in. I turned to Darcy and Marcus, giving a slight nod. "Handle the paperwork," I said. "We're done here." And then I walked out, leaving them behind. I didn't need to see the aftermath. I had built this reckoning with my own hands, brick by brick, step by step. And now, the empire they tried to steal was burning, not because I fought them at the gates, but because I cut the power to the castle before they even knew they were under siege. There's a certain satisfaction in letting people bury themselves. You don't push. You don't shout. You just step back and give them the rope, watch them tie the knots with their own greedy hands, and wait for the inevitable snap. 6 months before the so-called executive dinner, I started seeing it. The shifts in Alina's behavior were subtle at first, little things she thought I wouldn't notice. The way her smiles took a half-second longer to reach her eyes. How her late nights multiplied, stacking like quiet accusations against the promises we made each other. She stopped asking about my projects. She stopped pretending to care about the details that once excited her. Jules Moreno had been the first to pull me aside, her voice a murmur wrapped in concern. "I know you trust her," she said, pressing a file into my hands one evening after a board meeting. "But I trust what I see." Inside the folder were inconsistencies, minor at first glance. Expense reports double-billed under shell accounts. A series of advisory consultations that billed hours but produced no paper trail. Transactions too small to draw attention individually but suspicious when linked together. At first, I wanted to believe it was sloppy bookkeeping, maybe even growing pains. After all, Ironcrest was expanding fast, faster than we had prepared for, if I was honest. I wanted so badly for it to be a simple mistake that I almost shoved it into a drawer and forgot it. Almost. But Ironcrest wasn't just my company. It was my life's proof that I could build something lasting, something incorruptible. I had to know. So I dug. Quietly. I instructed Callie to start monitoring financial flows, nothing official, nothing that would trigger alarms. Just a few extra sets of eyes where it mattered most. I commissioned an independent audit disguised as a regular compliance check. I sat in on project reviews I usually delegated. And I watched. It didn't take long for the truth to start seeping through the cracks. Alina wasn't just distracted. She was planning. Ronan wasn't just overzealous. He was orchestrating. The two of them were moving money, shifting alliances inside the board, whispering promises into the ears of executives who thought they were betting on the winning side. I never confronted her. Every instinct screamed at me to burst through the door, to demand an explanation, to burn it all down before they could finish whatever they were building behind my back. But you don't demolish a building because you hear rats in the walls. You set the traps. And then you wait. While they plotted, I built my defenses. I approached Marcus Vale under the guise of seeking investment diversification, a quiet deal, layered in enough legal insulation that it barely registered on the radar. A strategic merger that would leave Marcus with the majority voting shares that he agreed to hold at my discretion. It wasn't ownership he wanted. It was leverage for future collaborations. And for me, it was an ironclad shield. I amended Ironcrest bylaws, burying the changes inside routine updates and strategic language so dense that even our most seasoned board members didn't blink. I tightened internal audits, restructured executive voting procedures, and, most importantly, ensured that CEO appointments would require unanimous approval, a nearly impossible threshold without me. I even rewrote my own employment contract, building in golden parachute clauses that would trigger catastrophic penalties if anyone tried to force my resignation without cause. By the time Ronan and Alina realized what they thought they owned, it would be like finding out the mansion you bought was built on quicksand. But I didn't stop there. I documented everything. Every suspicious transaction. Every backdoor meeting. Every whisper of collusion. I had Callie quietly archive internal emails. I had private investigators confirm off-site meetings between Alina and Ronan. I built a file so thick that even if they tried to spin it later, Even if they cried foul or painted themselves as victims, the evidence would crush them under its weight. I was meticulous. Because I wasn't just defending Ironcrest. I was laying siege to the empire they thought they could steal. And I knew. The best trap is the one your enemy walks into willingly, convinced they're the ones in control. I remember the night I finished reviewing the final audit report, alone in my home office. The house was silent, the city lights outside my window blinking against the darkness like distant stars. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. It should have hurt more. It should have broken something inside me, realizing that the woman I once would have moved mountains for was now plotting my professional execution. But it didn't. Maybe because some part of me had already said goodbye to her long ago, back when ambition started slipping into the spaces where love used to live. Back when every late night and every whispered conversation chipped away at the foundation we built together. I didn't mourn. I planned. Because if Alina and Ronan wanted a war, I wasn't going to meet them with rage and recklessness. I was going to meet them with blueprints and patience. The same way I built Ironcrest in the first place. Brick by careful brick. And when the time came, when they were standing in the rubble of their own betrayal, wondering how it all went wrong, I wouldn't have to say a single word. The ruins would speak for themselves. The fall wasn't sudden. It was slow, almost graceful, the kind of collapse that happens when a structure rots from the inside out and all it takes is one careful push for the whole thing to come crashing down. Alina arrived at the board meeting that morning like she still believed she could control the narrative. She wore a navy blue power suit, diamonds sparkling at her ears, her hair twisted into a knot so tight it could have been armor. She was poised, polished, the image of a woman used to winning even when she lost. But her heels clicked just a little too sharply against the marble floor. Her smile stretched just a little too wide. The cracks were already showing. The board had gathered at Marcus Vale's request for an emergency session. Word had spread quickly, though nobody said it aloud, not yet. Not until it was official. In business, vultures don't circle unless they smell blood. And right now, the air was thick with it. Ronan wasn't with her. He hadn't shown up at all. Probably because he knew better. I sat at the head of the table, back straight, fingers laced loosely together. Calm. Detached. Exactly how you needed to be when you were about to cut out a cancer. Marcus Vale sat to my right, a quiet storm in a $1,000 suit. Darcy Quinn was already laying out the paperwork in front of her, the final nails for the coffin we had spent months building. Alina took the seat across from me, her chin lifted high. She refused to meet my eyes. Good. She didn't deserve even that. Shall we begin? Marcus asked, his voice slicing through the tension like a scalpel. No objections. Darcy started. Effective immediately, she said, her tone cool and surgical. Alina Rhodes is removed from all financial oversight and strategic decision-making at Ironcrest Developments pending a full internal audit and ethics review. The words landed like hammer blows. Alina flinched, just slightly, but she caught herself quickly, sitting back in her chair with a brittle, icy smile. On what grounds? She demanded, her voice steady but her hands trembling just slightly where they rested on the polished wood. Darcy didn't blink. She slid a thick folder across the table. Insubordination. Breach of fiduciary duty. Conspiracy to commit corporate espionage, she said, each charge delivered with the precision of a blade. Alina opened the folder with stiff fingers. She skimmed the first few pages, her eyes darting faster, her breathing growing shallower the further she read. Every document was there. Every email. Every secret meeting logged and time-stamped. Every transfer she thought was invisible. Ironcrest maintains a zero-tolerance policy toward breaches of trust, Marcus added smoothly, almost kindly, like he was explaining a math problem to a particularly dim student. You, of all people, should understand that, Alina. She closed the folder slowly, her expression hardening into something colder, more vicious. You think this will stop me? She hissed. I smiled, just a little. Not mockery. Not triumph. Pity. You stopped yourself, I said quietly. Months ago. She stood abruptly, the chair screeching back against the floor, drawing startled glances from the executives around us. Some flinched. Some smirked behind their hands. None moved to follow her. Because loyalty in business, like love for people like Alina, has an expiration date. And hers had just passed. She turned on her heel, stalking toward the door, her heels stabbing the ground with every furious step. For a moment, I thought she might say something else, some parting shot, some desperate plea. But in the end, even she knew it would only make things worse. The door slammed behind her with a hollow, echoing thud. Marcus turned to me. Eyebrow arched slightly. Well, he said dryly. That was less dramatic than I expected. I gave a half shrug. She was never the kind to make a final stand. She just liked the idea of winning. Alina Rhodes ousted after internal audit reveals breach of trust. I sat in my office, the early morning sun spilling across the floor in long, golden streaks, and watched the news break like a slow-motion explosion. Each article, each breathless TV segment, carried another blow to the legacy Alina and Ronan thought they were securing for themselves. But none of it had come from me. I didn't leak the story. I didn't have to. Because Ronan, in his usual arrogant sloppiness, had been running another scheme alongside his little Ironcrest betrayal, cooking the books at one of his so-called startups to inflate valuations. It was that fraud investigation, totally unrelated to me, that kicked the doors wide open. When the feds raided his apartment, they found not only the fake startup ledgers but also a treasure trove of communications between him and Alina regarding their plans for Ironcrest. Greed makes people careless. I was counting on it. The subpoenas followed within days. Alina's name was dragged into the mess, tied to insider trading allegations and breach of corporate ethics. She wasn't officially charged, not yet, but the damage was done long before any courtroom saw the inside of her case. Investors withdrew from her private ventures. Her name became a black mark, whispered about at country clubs and executive lounges where alliances are built on reputation. Ironcrest, by contrast, rose clean from the wreckage. I made one, and only one, public statement. Standing in the glass lobby of our main office, reporters pressing forward with their mics extended like weapons, I kept my voice even, my face unreadable. At Ironcrest Developments, we take integrity seriously, I said. Even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. No further comments. No victory lap. The media could spin whatever narrative they wanted. I didn't care if they called me ruthless, cold, calculating. In fact, I preferred it. Better to be feared for your precision than pitted for your scars. Behind me, the Ironcrest team stood firm, Jules Moreno at my right hand now, freshly promoted to Chief Operating Officer. Callie just a few steps back, her headset in place, already fielding calls from new investors eager to bet on a company that could survive this kind of storm without capsizing. The industry saw it for what it was, a quiet, brutal takedown executed without a single wasted move. And in my world, respect matters more than sympathy. Ronan tried to spin his own version of events, of course. He sat down with a second-rate journalist 2 weeks later, bleary-eyed and bitter, claiming he had been forced out because he was too ambitious for Ironcrest's old-school leadership. The interviewer tried to throw him a lifeline, asking if he believed the company would survive without the innovative spark he claimed to bring. Ronan, predictably, seized the bait. They're dinosaurs, he said, waving a dismissive hand. Without me, they'll crumble. I watched the clip once, half smiling at his desperation. Because by then, Ironcrest had already closed a $250 million urban renewal project in San Diego, a deal Ronan had failed to secure during his entire tenure. A project that had come straight to my desk after investors saw how I handled the fallout. No, Ironcrest wasn't crumbling. It was evolving. Alina, on the other hand, disappeared from the public eye almost overnight. The woman who once thrived on attention, on curated Instagram posts and glossy magazine spreads, now refused to answer her door when reporters came knocking. She sold the downtown condo, vanished from the charity boards, deleted every photo she could from her social accounts, as if erasing the digital evidence could undo the betrayal printed in every headline. I heard whispers that she tried to start a new firm under a different name, that the investors laughed her out of the room once they made the connection, that even her friends started answering her calls less and less frequently. She built her empire on smoke and mirrors. And when the mirrors cracked, there was nothing left to reflect. I didn't gloat. I didn't throw parties or toast to her downfall. I just kept moving. There were contracts to sign, new offices to build, a company to lead, one that deserved better than to be reduced to a battleground for egos. Late one night, long after the reporters stopped calling and the scandal faded from the front page, I stood at the window of my office, looking down at the city. The world still moved. The towers still rose. And Ironcrest, my Ironcrest, stood taller than ever. Because real legacies aren't built on deception. They're built on the bones of those foolish enough to think they could steal what they never earned. And I wasn't finished building yet. Not by a long shot. I thought I was ready for it, the inevitable moment she would try to come back. But nothing quite prepares you for the sight of someone who once shared your dreams standing on your doorstep like a stranger. It was late. The kind of late where the city had gone quiet, where even the sirens seemed distant, muted by the heavy velvet of night. I had just finished reviewing the final drafts for a new project, a riverfront redevelopment we'd won 2 weeks ago, when the doorbell rang. At first, I thought it might be Callie dropping off paperwork. Maybe Jules, stopping by after another marathon planning session. But when I opened the door, it wasn't either of them. It was Alina. She stood there under the porch light, wrapped in a thin beige coat that didn't quite cover the bones of her. She looked smaller somehow. Her makeup was gone, her hair pulled back in a messy knot. No diamond earrings. No designer heels. Just a woman stripped bare of all the armor she used to wear so effortlessly. For one wild moment, I thought she was going to apologize. Really apologize. Not with the polished spin she had always mastered, not with the lawyer-approved words she used in boardrooms. Just her. Human. Fallible. But then she spoke. "I didn't think you'd actually do it," she whispered. Her voice cracked in the middle, like a bridge collapsing under too much weight. She didn't move toward me, didn't reach out, just stood there, shivering slightly, as if the consequences she had unleashed had finally caught up to her. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed loosely over my chest. "You never really knew me," I said quietly. And that was the truth, wasn't it? She had known the builder, the dreamer, the man who would lay brick after brick with bleeding hands just to keep the roof over them both. But she never really saw the foundation underneath, the part of me that didn't break when the walls caved in, the part that understood how to rebuild from nothing. She stepped forward slightly, hesitation thick in the space between us. "I made a mistake," she said, voice trembling. I thought we could fix it." There it was, the bargaining, the frantic scramble to salvage something from the ruins. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Instead, I stepped aside slightly, letting her see what waited behind me in the entryway. A box, neatly packed. Inside, her wedding ring, gleaming coldly against a bed of black velvet. A signed divorce settlement, prepared by Darcy, leaving her with exactly what she came into the marriage with, nothing more. And a letter from my attorney, making it clear that she had forfeited any claim to Ironcrest, the house, or any assets tied to my name. She stared at it for a long moment, the color draining from her face. Her mouth opened, forming the start of a plea, an argument, an excuse, I'll never know which. Because I didn't let her finish. I closed the door, slowly, firmly, until she was nothing more than a shadow behind frosted glass. I leaned my forehead against the wood for a moment, exhaling a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. There was no triumph in it, no satisfaction, only an aching finality. I watched her silhouette linger for a few minutes, saw her hand press against the door as if she could will it open. Then, slowly, it disappeared down the front steps, swallowed by the night. I didn't move until the sound of her footsteps faded completely. When I turned away, I didn't look back. There's a difference between closure and return. Closure is something you give yourself. Return is something you owe no one. I padded back into the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and sat at the table, staring out the window at the darkened skyline. For years, I thought building Ironcrest was the dream. That Alina was part of it. That she was the one person who understood what it meant to sacrifice, to sweat, to suffer for something larger than yourself. But she hadn't wanted to build. She had only ever wanted to inherit. It took losing everything, almost losing everything, for me to finally see the difference. She hadn't broken me. She had revealed me. The man who stood now was not the man she thought she could manipulate, not the man she thought would shatter when she turned her back. I had endured worse. I had survived scarcity, loneliness, betrayal before she ever laid eyes on me. And I would survive this. Stronger, clearer, unbreakable. The city lights blinked back at me through the kitchen window, a silent chorus of witnesses. I lifted the glass in a quiet salute, not to her, not to us, but to the future waiting just beyond the horizon. Because this chapter was over, and I wasn't wasting another word, another second, mourning the end of a story I had already outgrown. The funny thing about endings is that they're never as sharp as you expect. They don't slam shut with a bang. They just close, quietly, decisively, like a door you don't even realize you've walked through until it locks behind you. I didn't just survive what Alina and Ronan tried to do. I evolved. Ironcrest thrived in the months that followed. Not just survived, thrived. We restructured, refined, cut out the rot they had tried to spread through the foundation of everything I had built. And in their place, I planted something stronger. I promoted Jules Moreno to Chief Operating Officer, a title she had more than earned. She brought clarity, strength, and loyalty that couldn't be bought or sweet-talked. Where Alina had used charm to patch over weaknesses, Jules reinforced every weak point with unshakable steel. Callie, too. She moved up to head of strategic operations, overseeing our project pipelines with a precision and foresight I hadn't realized I was missing until it was too late. She didn't just manage schedules and numbers, she managed the heartbeat of Ironcrest, making sure that every move we made aligned with the core we fought to protect. We didn't just rebuild. We transformed. The old board members, the ones who wavered, the ones who had turned a blind eye while Alina and Ronan schemed, they were replaced quietly, efficiently. Marcus Vale helped broker the transitions, and in return, Ironcrest cemented its reputation as the company you didn't cross lightly. Because when the dust settled, everyone in the industry knew exactly what had happened. Not because I told them, because they saw it. They saw how a man they thought would fold rose instead, methodically dismantling the betrayal laid against him without breaking stride. They saw how Ironcrest, against all odds, emerged cleaner, sharper, more dominant than before. Ronan vanished into disgrace. No company would touch him. His name was whispered only in cautionary tales, the story of a man who flew too close to a flame he didn't understand. Alina became tabloid fodder. For a while, there were stories, sightings at exclusive resorts, rumors of new ventures that never materialized, speculation about a comeback that never came. Eventually, even the tabloids got bored. She drifted from the headlines like a paper boat sinking into murky water. As for me, I moved forward. Every morning, I walked past the steel beams and glass towers we had raised, past the sites where new foundations were breaking ground. Every crane, every scaffold, every hard hat moving through a sunrise spoke to something larger than betrayal, larger than loss. It spoke to resilience. It spoke to legacy. It spoke to a truth I had carved into the bones of Ironcrest itself. I don't just build companies. I build consequences. That was always the real story. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about punishing those who failed me. It was about making sure no one ever mistook my silence for surrender again. The world could applaud the showy victories, the headlines, the takedowns. Let them. But the real victories, the ones that mattered, were quieter, steadier. They were the contracts signed without fanfare, the loyalty earned without demands, the empire expanding because the foundation held when the storm came. Because that's what endurance looks like. It's not flashy. It's not easy. It's getting up, every single day, when the easy thing would be to stay down. It's pouring yourself into the work not because you need validation, but because it's what you are. Because creation, real creation, demands everything: sweat, blood, belief, and it demands it long after the applause has faded. Some nights, I stayed late at the office, sitting by the massive windows overlooking the city we helped shape. Sometimes I would let the silence fill the space around me, let the memories of what was lost and what was built coexist in the same breath. And I was okay with that. You can't rewrite the past. You can't unbreak what's been broken. But you can build something stronger in its place. And that's exactly what I was doing. I stopped answering calls from mutual friends who just wanted to talk. I ignored the half-hearted invitations to events where I knew I would be paraded as a cautionary tale or, worse, a curiosity. I didn't need to remind anyone who I was. They knew. And if they didn't, they weren't the ones I was building for anyway. One evening, long after the last employee had left and the elevators chimed softly in the distance, I walked the empty halls of Ironcrest. Floor after floor of clean, humming machinery. New hires. Expanded wings. Models of future developments lined up in the glass cases, promises waiting to be fulfilled. I stopped at the wall where our first project's photo hung, the lakeside development that started it all. I ran a hand along the frame, not with nostalgia, but with pride. Not because it had been easy, but because I had survived the parts that weren't. Because I had built something no thief, no liar, no traitor could ever truly take from me. My work wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about endurance. It was about building structures and lives that could withstand anything. Steel under skin, stone under heart, blueprints carved into bone. I turned away from the photo and headed back to my office, ready to lay down the next plans, ready to sketch out the next dream. Because there's no final chapter when you're the one writing the story. There's only the next project, the next tower, the next empire. And I wasn't done building yet. Not even close.